Hey, this is Bravo Chef Travis, and I'm here to give you a couple of tips on how to properly use your temp sensor. All right, tip number one is that your temp sensor is actually a ruler. So I'm going to bring this a little bit closer to the camera here so you can see. It goes all the way up to 2 inches. So we have 1 inch, 1.5, and 2 inches. It's really important to measure the height of your protein because that tells Bravo which recipe program to run, because different proteins that have different heights actually run on completely different recipe program. All right, tip number two has to do with the protein itself. Sometimes proteins have a thicker side than a thinner side. They're not all perfectly flat like a steak. Use a chicken breast, for example. There's always going to be a thicker side than a thin side. We want you to make sure that you're putting the temp sensor into the thickest side of that protein. So imagine that this orange is a piece of protein, and what we want you to do is first measure its height. And you're going to find that right here. Let's say it corresponds to about 2 inches. Then what we want you to do is, using perfectly horizontally, we want you to insert it right through the center of the thickest portion of the protein all the way to the handle. It's really important for protecting the temp sensor from the high levels of energy that Bravo is delivering to the food. So let's explore how these tips all work together. First, we're going to take the protein. Again, we're going to have the thickest side be on the left-hand side of the tray. We're then going to take the temp sensor and measure the height of the protein. Once we know that, we're going to horizontally insert it through the thickest portion of the protein. And then we're ready to move over to Bravo. All right. You can see that we have the tray resting on the floor of Bravo. That makes it a little bit easier to connect the temp sensor. So now we're ready to connect it. Make sure again that you have your protein on the left-hand side. And we are going to insert the connector. It'll make that sound. And then we're ready to place the tray on the proper shelf. I'm going to go on the lower shelf for this example. There's a couple of things I want you guys to notice. There's a guard right here, and this is actually meant to protect the temp sensor. So you always want to make sure that the cord is tucked underneath the guard. There's going to be some situations where you might have a little bit of tension in the cord that makes it really difficult to tuck it under. In order to fix that, all you have to do is give the cord or the handle a little quarter turn. That's going to release the tension and make it much easier to tuck underneath the guard. All right, so let's recap all these steps. First, you want to make sure that you use your temp sensor as a ruler so you measure the protein. Second, you want to insert the temp sensor all the way to the handle. You also want to make sure that you're inserting it through the thickest portion and that the thickest portion is on the left-hand side of the tray. Third, you want to make sure that you tuck the cord under the temp sensor guard. And if there's any tension in the cord, just make sure that you give it a quarter or a half turn. That should release that tension and make it tuck very easily. We really hope that this video gives you some great tips on using your temp sensor, and happy cooking, y'all.